Hello. In this video I'm going to show you how to estimate reliabilities, how to assess reliability, and how to create summated scales. This section is going to help you estimate the reliabilities for these variables like familiarity, expertise, and emotional connection to UTEP, referring to the section 2 in the instructions. Okay, so what do we have to do first? Well, I have to check all these questions, Ivy like 1 to Ivy like 5, are measuring if I like football or I don't. Rather than asking the question one time only, I ask it several times in my questionnaire to make sure that respondents are answering consistently the same question over and over again. So if they just answer one time, I don't know if they were reading the question, if that was really the true answer. But if I ask the question in several different ways and the responses are consistent, then I can be more certain that they responded with a true score, that the score is closer to the true score about their attitudes. So I asked 5 questions. So now what I have to do is go and check if those answers to those questions are consistent. So what we need to do is go to Analyze, Scale, Reliability, and then I'm going to select I like 1 to I like 5. So I'm going to put all the questions that measure the same construct, which is attitudes, together. I'm going to click on Statistics, and I'm going to select Item, Scale, Scale if item deleted, Correlations, and Means. That's going to give me a little bit more information about how these variables are related, or how these answers to these questions are related. So I'm going to click Continue, and I'm going to click OK. So in the output window, I'm going to see these results. I'm going to see reliability. I'm going to see that the questions that were asked will appear in this box. So bad, good, dislike, like, and attractive, attractive. I'm going to get the mean score for each response. And I'm going to get in this table something very important, which is called the Cronbach's alpha. Cronbach's alpha is going to tell me how consistent, how similar the responses were. It goes from 0 to 1. In this case, I have 0.59. Now the rule that I'm going to use is that Cronbach's alpha has to be above 0.8. Sometimes some people go below 0.8 to 0.7, 0.75, depending on the questions that you're asking. In this case, the questions are all about attitudes, so I can be a little bit more rigorous about saying, no, they have to answer very consistently, otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. If you think football, if you don't like football, then you don't think football is attractive. So in this case, we have a bad score. We have 0.59. It is below 0.8, which is going to be a rule of thumb for us. It's going to be 0.8. So what do? I have to go and identify what's going on. Is there a specific question that probably is different from the rest? Or do we have many questions different from each other? So what I need to do is go all the way down and look for this box over here, this output, which is called Item Total Statistics. What I'm going to look at is I'm going to look at the item total correlation. And I'm going to look at the corrected item total correlation. I'm going to look for values that are below 0.8 or 0.7. So as you can see, this value over here is clearly different from the rest. It's minus 0.64. Now if you look at the wording of the question, it's negatively correlated to the rest because it goes from interesting to uninteresting. So the scale, in this case, the scale item was reverse coded, which means that interesting is a value of 1 and interesting was a value of 7. If you look at the other questions, it goes from unattractive to attractive, which is the opposite. So people are expected to answer the opposite. I can go and recode the data and then change the values and transform 1s to 7s, 7s to 1s, and so on and so forth, and then see if that fixes the problem. For your exercise, all I want you to do right now is to get familiar with Chromebox Alpha. Know that these items cannot be combined because I would be making a mistake by combining these scores that are not consistent. And I want you just to see what happens if you eliminate this item from the analysis. So what you need to do is to say, okay, interesting and interesting, it's gonna be Ivy like 1, 2, 3, 4, Ivy like 4 out. So I'm gonna go and analyze, rerun the analysis one at a time. If you have two variables that are below 0.8, you do one at a time. So Ivy like out, Ivy like 4 out. So I just have these 4 items. Click OK again. And now what I see is that I actually fixed Chromebox Alpha to 0.95. If you go back to the previous table, you know that if you drop this item here, look at the last column, it says Chromebox Alpha if the item is deleted. Note that we have 0.952, which is exactly what we get when we deleted it. So this column tells you if you delete this item, this is how the Chromebox Alpha is going to look like after you delete it. So that also gives me an indication that I have to delete this item. Rerun the analysis. I have 0.952. I go down just to double check the item total correlations. All of them look good. All of them are above 0.8. And deleting any of these items will not significantly increase Chromebox Alpha. The highest I can get is 0.954, which is very similar. So I'm ready now to know that I can combine the scores for these 4 items. So I know which items I need to combine for the I like scale. So it's going to be I like 1, I like 2, I like 3, and I like 5. So what I would do is I would make a note to myself and I would say I like 2, 3, and 5. Now I want to go and see if the familiarity items are consistent, if the responses to the familiarity items. So I'm gonna go and say analyze, scale, reliability. Now all I have to do is take those out, get the familiarity items in. I don't have to select statistics, it will remember my choices. So I just need to click OK, and I can see that's a Chromebox Alpha of 0.947. Go look at the item total correlation is above 0.8. So these 2 items can be combined. And it's Chromebox Alpha or 0.94. So I'm going to say yes, I can combine. And alpha is actually equals to 0.9. score. So I remember typically in a report, in a research report, you have to report the alpha to let me know how consistent these responses were. So it's a good thing that you keep track of these values. So in the exam, if I ask you what was the alpha, were you combine these items, yes or no? Yes. Why? Because alpha is above 0.8. It's 0.94. I didn't write the I like, so it's 0.95. So alpha equals 0.95. Okay, so I'm done with these two. Now I do the same thing with expertise. So I asked 3 questions about expertise. I want to see if they are consistent. So I take those out, I get the expertise back in, select OK, and look at the Chromebox Alpha, 0.97, very consistent responses. I look at the item total correlation, looks good. So the answer is yes, I can combine the scores for these items. So can you combine these? Yes, it's okay, and alpha equals 0.97. Some people round up or down. I just like to report just what you see. That's typically my approach, is report what you see, don't make any interpretations, don't do roundups or downs, just report what you see. Let people make their own judgment if they want to round up or down. Just report what you see. Then we have the IV EA1 to EA4, which is how connected you are to the university. Repeat the process. EA1 4. Okay. Go look at the alpha. Sometimes the output just takes you all the way down, so you have to go up. So be careful that you're looking at the right item, so always check the questions. Sometimes you make a mistake in the coding of the questions, but you can look at the questions right here. 0.938, so I'm going to say yes. Alpha equals 0.93. And just to double check the item total correlations, you have all the items above 0.8. Okay, so I already know what I can combine. Now the question is, how do I combine these scores? So when reliability is acceptable, which we already checked, we got to the acceptance level that we are happy with. We deleted the item that was problematic. We are happy with an alpha of 0.95. We are ready to combine these variables. Combining the variables is called making summated scales. Summated scales is a combination of different questions, and we're going to call an overall attitude score by combining Ivy like 1 to Ivy like 5, and excluding Ivy like 4. Ivy FAM is going to be 1 and 2. Ivy EXP is going to be 1, 2, and 3. And Ivy EA is going to be all of them, 1, 2, 3, 4. So what do I do now? Well, what I have to do now is click Analyze. Then what I'm going to do is go to Transform, and I'm going to compute a variable. So I'm going to create a new variable. The target variable, I'm going to label this variable as instructed. In this case, it's going to be Ivy like. So Ivy like equals, I open the parentheses here, so open here your brackets, and select the variables that you want to average. So we're going to do an average score. So I'm going to select Ivy like 1 plus Ivy like 2 plus Ivy like 3 plus Ivy like 5. Remember, we excluded Ivy like 4. And then I'm going to go and say divided by 1, 2, 3, 4 questions, 4 scores, divided by 4. That we're going to get our average score. So I'm going to click OK. So when I do that, what's going to happen if you go to the variable view, all the way to the bottom, it's going to create this Ivy-like score. It's not going to label anything, so I have to come and label. I typically like to label it with the same name first, so that's what shows in the screen. Ivy-like, and then I typically like to remember what is that I average here. So it's like 1, 2, 3, and 5, and say alpha equals 0.95. That way you will always remember which items this value represents and what was the alpha. In case you want to report this later on, you don't have to go back and look at the output. You can just use this for your report. And I typically go and drag all these all the way to the top. So I have my variable. So now what I have to do is do the same thing with the others. So I have to go and transform, compute variable. Now I need IBFAM. And IBFAM, if you remember, it's going to be IBFAM 1 plus IBFAM 2 divided by 2, and then I click OK. Now the computer here is going to remember what you're doing, but again, as I said, you don't want to be saving, going back to the output tomorrow when you want to remember what you did. So what I typically do is go and write down here. So IBFAM was IBFAM 1 and 2, and it has an alpha of 0.94. Okay, then I do the same with the next variable, which is going to be IBExp. I'm going to include all of them, 1, 2, 3. So transform, compute variable, IBExp, and then I'm going to do IBExp 1 plus IBExp 2 plus IBExp 3 divided by 3 now, and then I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to come and label it, and I'm going to say IBExp, and then I'm going to say IBExp 1, 2, and 3, and has an alpha of 0.97. And finally, I'm going to do the same for the emotional connection to UTEP. So I'm going to say IVEA, emotional attachment, open my brackets, IVEA1 plus IVEA2 plus IVEA3 plus IVEA4 divided by 4. Okay. I typically open this because I double check that I actually did the right ones. You have, at this point, you have done a lot of work. You have collected data, you have cleaned data. You don't want to mess up adding the wrong numbers. That would be just wrong. So IVEA, and I include 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's a lot of detail, but remember, you're going to make decisions based on these results. So you want to be super careful in having the right numbers. Okay, so I have my independent variables. As you can see, I have IVA like, IVFAM, IVExp, IVEA. Now we also have IVWatch, which was another independent variable, but this one has only one question. It's one single item scale. So there's nothing to aggregate, there's nothing to average. So I just have one. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 independent variables, one dependent variable. So I'm all set. So at this point, I'm all set now to start investigating our testing the relationships between these variables. I save, and I'm ready for the next step. So I come and check my instructions. I already checked for the reliability. I already did my transformation and averaged the scales. I already have my summated scales. I'm ready to go to section 3 and check for typos and other stuff. So so that's it. Okay, now you have to practice and then go to the next video.